Russ, good morning. How are you?
Good to see you.
How's your week kicked off? Monday morning at the Sound, busy for you?
Yeah, really good start to the week. Thanks. Lots of exciting things going on as we head into Q2. So yeah, very, very excited for a Monday morning.
Great to hear. Well, look, thank you for joining us for Pion's Ask the Expert. I know you're quite familiar with Pion. You've been at a few of our YMS events in the past. You're obviously working with us on our event coming up in June. Yeah, so a big warm welcome. Russ, let's kick things off with three interesting facts that you think or you feel comfortable sharing that you think our audience should know about you. Yeah, three things about Russ that we should know. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've got a PhD in applied linguistics, which in simple terms was about understanding what people mean when they say something. When I was much younger, I had an international ranking in table tennis. And I've traveled the world with my job. I'm very lucky to travel the world. But I also had a project where I saw all four corners of the UK in about a week, sort of north, south, east, west.
Fantastic. And what was your favorite out of all those four corners, if you can say?
So for that project, it was probably, we went to the East Coast to somewhere in Norfolk, and we never get to go there for research. Normally you go to the big cities. This
Yeah,
piece took us to go and speak to farmers for some research with them. And so, yeah, it's just part of the world that I don't know, wouldn't normally go to, but fascinating to see.
excellent. Look, sounds good. And ping pong table tennis, you said. Table
And
tennis.
definitely table tennis, not ping pong. That's a pet peeve when people call it ping pong. But yeah, I played a lot when I was younger. It was the main sort of sport that I did. Absolutely loved it. Don't get to play now as much.
Excellent. Well, look, a very warm welcome. Russ, want to kick things off by, I guess, maybe taking you back a few years to when you were growing up and the brands, if any, that you were drawn to when you were growing up, and what resonated about those brands to you, if at all. Yeah, anything come to mind?
I think it's interesting that as kids, you're probably less aware of branding and brands, or certainly 40 odd years ago, less aware than maybe people are now. We're much savvier sort of society when it comes to brands and commerce now. But the one that immediately springs to mind when I think about my youth is probably HMV, so the music and film shop. And I think because for me, it was that it was a tool to help craft your identity, discover your identity, and then communicate it back out to other people. Which, when you're going through your formative years, a brand that can help you do that to some extent is really powerful. So yeah, I'd say HMV.
HMV, and I usually ask, is that still within your remit of brands that you love? And it's obviously made a resurgence over the past couple of years. Is it still in favour? You there looking through the records still?
It's interesting actually because the way I interact with music now is through Spotify. It's the sort of the modern HMV, right? But I've got four kids. My eldest is 12, and starting to go through that process of identity and discovery and finding the things that you love. So I was in an HMV just at the weekend, sort of looking at stuff with her and talking about it. So yeah, in a different way, but very much still present in my life, and I love it for that.
Fantastic. And then Russ, moving into your journey into the marketing world, it'd be great to hear a bit about your background. I know you referenced your studying and kind of what you've been working on around your PhD. But yeah, it'd be good to understand more about what led you to where you're at today within the sound and your previous careers.
Yeah, so I started at a company called the Futures Company, who have been wrapped up long since into the Kantar machine. But I landed at that through a fortuitous conversation at a wedding where I was still finishing my PhD. I was talking to a researcher. They said, "Oh, what you do sounds interesting," and I was sat there thinking, "Well, what you do sounds bloody interesting as well." I've always been fascinated by people, by language, by communication, and increasingly by brands. And so, just through being in the right place at the right time and having something hopefully interesting to say, I guess, and being a curious person, I found my way in to the industry.
And what was your first like marketing role that you landed? Was it with that?
Yeah, so it was a research exec with the Futures Company. So I was a very junior researcher going out, doing the field work, exploring things. And at a point where I didn't really know what I'd signed up for, what the job entailed, but I knew that I was interested by people and business and brands, and it seemed a good way in, really.
Yeah. And I guess out of the insights and research field, what is it that keeps you going every day? What is it about that sort of drives that passion that you've got that you know that you've got for the industry?
Yeah, I often talk about it in terms of it's like having a first draft on culture. We get to see the stuff before it launches because we're involved in the development of it. And a lot of the time, the stuff that we're working on never makes it into real life, out into the world. But it's a bit like being an editor or a journalist. You get to see stuff, you get to shape stuff to small degrees often, but it's something that is incredibly grounding because you get to literally see all four corners of the country. You get to travel to Sao Paulo, to Kenya, to wherever it is you might be going, and meet people and speak to them about things that otherwise you just wouldn't have access to. So for me, it fuels sort of that innate curiosity I've got about the world, and it also keeps me incredibly grounded.
Yeah.
Most of us are ourselves plus or minus a bit of variance in terms of how we live. This job forces you to go right to the edges of culture and society and see and interact with things that you normally wouldn't.
And Russia, linguistics and language, it's obviously one of your key passion points and something that brands are really jumping on now. We saw last summer the Curry's Gen Z script being a key example of how people are using language. What's your take on this? I imagine it's obviously it's a very exciting time for you, like within the space. Yeah, what's your take on how things are shifting?
So I guess the first point for me is that language is not something where there's right and wrong or there aren't custodians of language. I'm what you would call a descriptivist linguist. I'm someone who loves listening to things, observing them and seeing what's going on and taking learnings from that. So I think anything that is playing with language, trying to connect, trying to innovate and evolve things is a really worthy and interesting endeavor. I think the flip side of that is that language is also sort of a window into our souls, and that's true for brands as well. So if you're doing it in an inauthentic way, people will smell that a mile off. So if you're playing with language, using language, that's great, but also do it in an authentic and true to life way.
Are there any brands of late that are doing anything in the space, like around language, that's really, sparked your interest, or maybe thought actually they're going down the wrong path with that? Yeah, anything come to mind?
So I think the interesting one that's been in the news over the last week or so has been the financial company Standard Life Aberdeen, where the Aberdeen part rebranded a few years ago to get rid of all the vowels and to sort of have a more youth-focused, I guess, approach to their branding. There was a lot of mockery about it at the time, and 3 or 4 years later, they've now sort of gone back and they're now spelling themselves properly, I suppose you might say, and sort of they actually talked about we need to move on from this distraction. So as I said before, I think playing with language is a beautiful thing to do, but you've got to be doing it for the right reasons and in the right way. Otherwise, you can look very silly.
Yeah, look, absolutely. They're kind of keen to move on from adding in back, vowels added back in. And Ross, a big part of your work at the Sound, around consumer insights. What advice would you give to our audience, who are marketers that really want to understand the attitudes and behaviors of young people, Gen Alpha, and their future consumers? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think for me, I think if you want to understand people of any age, but particularly those who maybe you're less close to or less familiar with, you need to actually really go and do that. Spend time with them, walk in their shoes, be in their homes, invite them into online communities and groups if you want to as well. But understand the people. There's a huge swirl in our industry at the minute about the potential for synthetic respondents and synthetic research. I'm sure it will find its place and have its role. But for me, if you want to understand people, speak to people.
If you want to understand people, speak to people. I like that. Like keep it simple. And Gen Z, Gen Alpha, huge subject matter. Obviously, our event YMS coming up in June, and here at Pion, it's something that we feel very passionately about. If Gen Z could steal one thing from your generation, what do you think it should be?
I think it's so hard being Gen Z, Gen Alpha. And I grew up in a time before smartphones where you could live, make your mistakes privately. Now everything is filtered through the lens of everyone's got a camera. You're surrounded, you're surveillanced, even if you don't know it, and you've got no privacy. And I think that's an incredibly hard way to grow up. I think the other side of it is that all of the world's information is in your hand. As soon as you've got access to a smartphone or a tablet, all of the world can come to you. There's a huge amount that is incredibly powerful about that, but you don't have to peek too far into the headlines to see that the world's a challenging place at the minute. And so that pressure coming at you from every angle, every notification, every alert is something that I'm sure isn't good for people's mental health. So there's huge opportunity, but there's also real challenges for them as well.
Yeah. And what is it that you think you think that we should have left behind that they've no longer got, but thank goodness. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think quite a lot. I mean, it sounds like I'm sort of just slating the past, but more from the perspective of as a society and culture, we've made huge progress over the last few decades. It doesn't always feel like it, and it certainly doesn't necessarily feel like it now with the current political environment globally. But there's been a huge amount of progress on many levels, and so yeah, leave a lot of that sort of the past behind, and let's keep moving the long arc of justice, as it's been
Yeah.
said. It does progress, and yeah, so leave behind the things that should stay there.
The steps that should stay. I absolutely agree with that. And YMS this June, you're going to be delving into what it means to be human in the AI like native era. What do you think that means for Gens Alpha at the moment?
Yeah, it struck me when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about that we talk a lot about Gen AI, but we also talk about Gen X, Gen Z, etc. Actually, is Gen AI generative AI or is it generation AI? And so what I'm going to be exploring is what does it mean to be the first generation to be growing up with generative AI? And in parallel to that, therefore, what does it mean to be human? What's the stuff that is uniquely us? In the social sciences, they talk a lot about the sentence being, well, only humans can do X. And that used to be language, it used to be tools, it used to be maths, it used to be creativity. Over time, we've found all sorts of animals that can do all of these things, but now it's the machines we need to worry about as well. So where does that leave us as humanity for people coming up in this era? What does it mean for you as an individual? I think one thing that's playing on my mind at the minute is that we used to be a society based on sort of physical labor. But now for most of us, we sit at desks, we talk, we do stuff on laptops. So we go to the gym to stay fit and healthy because life doesn't give us that. What does that look like in the future when our mental strength is also taken from us by our day to day because we've outsourced all the thinking? Will we need to find the equivalent of the mental gym? There's so many sort of different areas of this that I'm going to be exploring. Not quite sure where I'm going to land up yet. But yeah, what does it mean to be human in the world of AI?
Right. And yeah, I think like you've got 20 minutes. So it's like it's a lot to cover in 20 minutes for sure. But no, no, it sounds fascinating. And Russ, for you as a person, as a marketeer, as an individual, or something, that's seeing all this evolve in front of our eyes, what's your personal take on how young people are going to adapt and embrace AI?
It's such a fast moving world that you can end up looking very silly making any sort of predictions or having big strong
Yeah.
opinions about how it's going to evolve and which path it's going to take. My current view is that I'm actually a little bit cynical in terms of the value that it'll have over the longer term. It feels like we're very, very close to having something which will be absolutely amazing, but in terms of sort of being able to just set it off to go and do various tasks and tools and to do this, that and the other. But at the moment, you still have to have the human interface because what comes back isn't right. It's not, there's hallucinations, there's things that just aren't accurate. The thing that's harder to spot is the things that are missing. You don't know what's not been picked up. I wonder if actually over time, what we'll find is that AI actually demonstrates the value of being human and of having that sort of human interaction in whatever process it is that you're doing. You still need humanity in there. So again, tying back into that theme of what does it mean to be human, I wonder if actually the boom of AI will help to answer that and show us some of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Russ, a huge passion for what you do can absolutely like that's coming through. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? And any thoughts?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I do absolutely love what we do. You're right. It's the only career I've had. I can't really imagine doing anything else. But as part of what I do now, as a leader in the industry, hopefully, certainly within our business, I like mentoring and coaching and helping the next generation come through. I get a huge amount of satisfaction from that, and I think it's a really important thing to do. Both my parents were teachers, and I sort of swore that I would never be a teacher. I think if I wasn't doing this and sort of 20 years on from that decision, I think I'd be a teacher.
Be a teacher. Look, absolutely. Well, look, to an extent, you're being able to pass on your knowledge to all our audience as well. So look, there's a bit of that like coming through. And Russ, if you were to give our audience, one key takeaway from our conversation today, whether it's around insight or whether it's around, the future of AI and so on, what would that one key takeaway be for our audience?
I think, given an audience of marketers and who people are engaging with humans and understanding, I think keep the humanity in our industry is the key thing for me. There's so much opportunity to shortcut it out of the process, whether that's AI researchers, AI participants, AI marketers, even, I don't know. But ultimately, as long as the industry remains about selling to people, then we need to understand people and maintain our humanity.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I absolutely agree, by the way, on that point. Super. Russ, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you in June.